The message arrived on a Tuesday. Not that days of the week meant much in deep space, but Captain Vreltak had always found comfort in maintaining Earth Standard Time aboard the Celestial Vanguard. It gave the crew something familiar to cling to, even as they patrolled the outer reaches of known space. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Alliance Command," Lieutenant Curie said, her four-fingered hands moving deftly across the holographic interface. "Priority Alpha." Vreltak's secondary heart skipped a beat. Priority Alpha meant only one thing: the Shroud had made another push into Alliance territory. "Put it through to my quarters," he said, rising from his command chair. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances as he left, his tall, angular frame casting long shadows under the dim emergency lighting they'd been running for the past 3 cycles to avoid detection. Once alone, Vreltak activated his secure terminal. The wrinkled face of Admiral Zahn appeared, looking more exhausted than Vreltak had ever seen him. "Captain, I'll be brief. Outpost Sigma 9 has fallen. The Meridian colony is under siege. The Shroud have deployed a new type of bioweapon that our shields can't counter." The Admiral paused, his gills fluttering in what Vreltak recognized as deep distress. "We're sending you a weapon." "A weapon?" Vreltak repeated, confused. The Celestial Vanguard was a reconnaissance vessel, not a battleship. "With respect, Admiral, shouldn't this go to the front line? This isn't a conventional weapon, Captain. It's experimental. High Command believes your location makes you the ideal insertion point." Admiral Zahn's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You'll be receiving a single human." Vreltak blinked all 3 of his eyes in succession, certain he'd misheard. "A human? Admiral, I don't understand." "Humans are a protected species. They've barely achieved interstellar travel. The non-interference protocols have been temporarily suspended by unanimous vote of the High Council," the Admiral cut in. "The human has volunteered. That's all you need to know." Before Vreltak could protest further, the Admiral continued, "Rendezvous coordinates are attached. The human arrives in 6 hours. Zahn out." The screen went dark, leaving Vreltak staring at his own reflection. A human. In all his 60 cycles of service, he'd never even seen one in person. They were kept isolated, their homeworld cordoned off by Alliance decree after the catastrophic first contact that had nearly wiped out the Observer Team 3 centuries ago. Humans were dangerous. Everyone knew that. Their planet, with its punishing gravity and toxic oxygen atmosphere, had bred creatures of terrifying strength and endurance. And their minds? Unpredictable, emotional, capable of both stunning creativity and horrifying violence. What could one human possibly do against the Shroud that the combined might of the Alliance could not? 6 hours later, Vreltak stood in the docking bay alongside his executive officer, Commander Shore, and Dr. Ilani, the ship's chief medical officer. The small transport shuttle had docked moments ago, and the airlock was cycling. "Remember," Vreltak cautioned his officers, "no sudden movements. Don't bare teeth or make direct eye contact. The briefing data suggests these can be interpreted as threats." The airlock hissed open and a figure stepped through. Vreltak had expected something larger, more obviously threatening. The human stood shorter than any of them, with no scales, spines, or obvious defensive adaptations. It had patches of fur on its head and face, and wore a simple black uniform bearing a single unfamiliar insignia. "Captain Vreltak?" The human's voice was deeper than expected, resonating in a way that sent an involuntary shiver down Vreltak's spine. "Lieutenant Thomas Chin, Earth Defense Force. I believe you're expecting me." Vreltak performed the formal greeting gesture. "Welcome aboard the Celestial Vanguard, Lieutenant Chin. This is my executive officer, Commander Shore, and our chief medical officer, Dr. Ilani." The human nodded to each of them, then looked directly at Vreltak with an unsettling intensity. Those eyes, Vreltak had read about human eyes, but seeing them in person was different. No protective membrane, completely exposed, yet somehow conveying a depth of awareness that made Vreltak feel seen in a way that was profoundly uncomfortable. "I understand time is short," Chin said. "I'd like to review your intelligence on the Shroud forces and begin planning immediately." Dr. Ilani stepped forward, her medical scanner humming. "With respect, Lieutenant, you've just traveled through deep space. Protocol requires a full medical evaluation before." "Your protocols don't apply to me, Doctor," Chin interrupted, his tone remaining even but somehow carrying an unmistakable edge. "I've been extensively modified for this mission. Anything your scanner tells you will likely raise more questions than answers." Modified. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. What had they done to this human? And what was he truly capable of? Lieutenant Chin is right, Vreltak decided. Time is critical. Commander Shore, escort the lieutenant to the tactical room and provide all available intelligence on the Shroud incursion. I'll join you shortly. As Chin followed Shore from the docking bay, Dr. Ilani moved close to Vreltak, lowering her voice. Captain, that human is wrong. My preliminary scan detected multiple synthetic components, genetic modifications and chemical compounds I can't even identify. Whatever they've sent us, it's not just a human anymore. Vreltak watched the docking bay doors close behind Chin. No, he agreed quietly. It's a weapon. Over the next rotation, Vreltak observed Chin with growing unease. The human rarely slept, consumed minimal sustenance, and spent hours absorbing tactical data at speeds that should have been impossible for organic processing. When questioned about his modifications, Chin simply replied, everything necessary was done. On the third day, as the Celestial Vanguard approached the edge of Shroud-controlled space, Chin requested a private meeting with Vreltak. I need a shuttle, the human stated without preamble. Small, fast, minimally armed. One person only. Vreltak studied him carefully. You intend to infiltrate Shroud territory alone? Chin nodded. That was always the plan, Captain. I'm to be inserted behind enemy lines, make my way to the Meridian colony, and neutralize the bioweapon source. That's suicide, Vreltak said bluntly. Even with your modifications. For the first time, Chin smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. Captain, do you know why humans were quarantined by the Alliance? The real reason. Vreltak hesitated. The official records state that humans were too volatile, too aggressive for safe integration. Partially true, Chin acknowledged, but incomplete. Humans weren't quarantined to protect the Alliance from us. We were quarantined to protect us from you. He leaned forward. Because once unleashed we cannot be controlled. And now they're unleashing me. As Vreltak prepared the shuttle as requested, a terrible thought occurred to him. Perhaps the human wasn't the weapon at all. Perhaps what High Command had sent was something far worse. A glimpse of humanity's true potential, finally unchained and pointed at their enemies. And if Chin succeeded, what then? Would such a weapon ever willingly return to its cage? Vreltak watched from the observation deck as the shuttle departed, a tiny speck of light against the vast darkness, carrying its lone human passenger toward Shroud territory. Something twisted in his gut, an ancient instinct, perhaps warning of danger. Not from the Shroud, but from the decision to unleash what his ancestors had once deemed too dangerous to allow free passage among the stars. Do you think he'll succeed? Commander Shore asked, joining him at the viewport. Her scales had dulled slightly, a sign of stress among her species. I don't know, Vreltak admitted. But I suspect success isn't what High Command is measuring. A test then? Of some kind. Vreltak turned away from the viewport. Have Dr. Ilani report to my quarters. I want to know everything her scans picked up about our guest. 3 hours later, Vreltak stared at the holographic display hovering above his desk, showing Chen's physiological data. Dr. Ilani pointed to several highlighted areas with her slender finger. These bone structures, reinforced with some form of carbon nanotubes. And here, the muscle density is nearly triple what's normal for their species. The nervous system has been augmented with synthetic pathways, allowing for processing speeds that rival our best AI systems. She paused, mandibles clicking nervously. But most concerning are these compounds in his bloodstream. They're reactive. Designed to trigger cascading physiological responses under certain conditions. Meaning? Meaning he can temporarily boost already enhanced strength, speed, and cognition at will. At a cost, I imagine. No organic system could sustain such output indefinitely. Vreltak studied the data silently for a moment. And the psychological modifications? Ilani hesitated. That's where my analysis becomes speculative. But based on brainwave patterns, I believe they've altered emotional processing centers. Fear responses are almost non-existent. Empathy appears selectively suppressed. Yet problem-solving and tactical centers are hyperactive. They've made him a predator, Vreltak said softly. A perfect predator. Yes, Dr. Ilani agreed. But that's not what troubles me most. She manipulated the display to show a subcellular scan. These markers in his genetic code, they're not stable. Whatever they've done to him, it's not meant to last. The implication hung heavy in the air. Chin was designed to burn bright and fast, a shooting star, not a sustainable weapon. How long? Weeks perhaps. A month at most before cellular breakdown begins. Ilani's expression softened with what might have been pity. He must know this. Vreltak dismissed the doctor and sat alone in his quarters, thoughts churning. In the 300 years since first contact with Earth, the Alliance had maintained a careful distance from humanity. The official record spoke of an aggressive, unpredictable species that needed time to mature before joining galactic society. But as Chin had hinted, there was more to the story. Vreltak accessed the ship's secure archives, bypassing several security protocols with his captain's clearance. The file he sought was buried under layers of encryption, classified at the highest level. The true account of first contact. The initial survey team that discovered Earth had followed standard protocols for pre-spaceflight civilizations. Passive observation, no interaction. But something went wrong. A ship malfunction forced an emergency landing in a remote area. The survey team, consisting of 5 different Alliance species, found themselves stranded on a world they'd underestimated. It wasn't the planet's punishing gravity or oxygen-rich atmosphere that posed the greatest danger. It was the humans who discovered them. The file contained testimonies from the 2 survivors. Descriptions of human adaptability that bordered on the impossible. How quickly they learned to communicate. How relentlessly they pursued the truth once they realized they weren't alone in the universe. And most disturbing of all, how rapidly they reversed-engineered components of the downed ship. In just 6 weeks of contact, the humans had begun to replicate Alliance technology that had taken other species centuries to develop. Their rate of technological assimilation was unprecedented, described by one survivor as terrifyingly exponential. The quarantine wasn't just to protect the Alliance from human aggression. It was to prevent humanity from advancing too quickly, from destabilizing the careful balance of power among the galactic community. And now, faced with extinction at the hands of the Shroud, the Alliance had decided to unshackle their sleeping tigers. A signal alert pulled Vreltak from his reading. The tactical officer's voice came through the comm. "Captain, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the Meridian colony. The patterns are fluctuating in ways we've never seen before." "On my way," Vreltak responded, closing the classified file. Whatever was happening, Chin was at the center of it. The bridge was tense when Vreltak arrived, officers hunched over stations, monitoring rapidly changing data streams. "Report," he commanded. "The Shroud fleet surrounding Meridian has altered formation," the tactical officer explained. "They appear to be converging on a single point within the colony's industrial sector. And there's this," he highlighted a communication frequency. "It's Shroud internal communications, but the encryption is degrading in real time. Something's interfering with their systems. Can we listen in?" "Patching through now, Captain." The sound that filled the bridge wasn't language, at least not in any conventional sense. The Shroud communicated through modulated frequencies, more mathematical than verbal. But even to untrained ears, the frantic, disorganized patterns suggested one thing: panic. "They're scared," Commander Shore whispered. "I've never seen Shroud communications this chaotic." Before Vreltak could respond, another alert sounded. "Captain, the bioweapon signature is changing." The science officer's voice cracked with disbelief. It's being reprogrammed somehow." "Reprogrammed? That's impossible. The Shroud bioweapons are genetically locked to their command structures." "Yes, sir, but these readings suggest the command structure itself is being altered. As if something, or someone, has hacked into their biological programming language." Vreltak felt a chill run through him. Somehow, the human was rewriting the Shroud's bioweapon from the inside out. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from Lieutenant Chen's emergency beacon." "Put it through." Chen's voice came through distorted, interspersed with bursts of static. "Captain Vreltak. Shroud bioweapon. Not what we thought. It's not a weapon, it's a translation matrix. They're not trying to destroy, trying to convert. Assimilate. Lieutenant, your signal is breaking up. What have you found?" "The Shroud, they're running from something too. Something worse. The bioweapon was designed to prepare worlds. Make them compatible." A harsh cough interrupted his words. "I've redirected it. Turned their own tool against them. But I need extraction. Soon. We'll send a team immediately. Transmit your coordinates." "No time." Chen's voice was weaker now. "The changes I've made, they're not stable. When this thing detonates, you don't want to be anywhere near here. I'm sending data packets instead. Everything I've learned. Everything you need to know about what's coming." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by a stream of densely packed data flowing into the ship's computers. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "Shroud ships are breaking formation. They're retreating." On the main view screen, the Shroud fleet scattered like startled birds, moving away from Meridian Colony at maximum speed. "They're running?" Shore said in disbelief. "What could make the Shroud run?" Vreltak stared at the view screen, watching as a strange glow began to emanate from the colony below. "Not what?" he said quietly. "Who?" The encrypted data from Chen continued to pour in, filling the ship's storage banks with information no Alliance species had ever possessed. The complete biological and technological blueprint of the Shroud, their weaknesses, their origins, and most importantly, their fears. All extracted and decoded by one modified human in less than a day. The glow from Meridian Colony intensified, a blue-white radiance that seemed to pulse with deliberate rhythm, like a message being broadcast to the stars themselves. And in that moment, Captain Vreltak understood with perfect clarity why humans had been kept isolated for 3 centuries. It wasn't to protect the Alliance from humans. It was to protect the universe from what humanity might become. 3 days after the Shroud's unprecedented retreat from Meridian Colony, the Celestial Vanguard maintained orbit around the now quiet world. The pulsing blue-white glow had faded 12 hours after Chen's final transmission, leaving behind an eerie silence. No communications came from the surface. Sensor scans showed no movement, no signs of life, but also no evidence of destruction. It was as if the entire colony had simply paused, frozen in time. "We need to send a team down there," Shore insisted, "not for the first time. We can't just orbit indefinitely waiting for whatever this is to resolve itself." Vreltak studied the holographic representation of the colony floating above the situation table. The data packets Chen had transmitted continued to decrypt themselves automatically, revealing layers of information that their systems could barely process. Whatever the human had discovered about the Shroud, it was far beyond Alliance understanding. The last unencrypted message from Lieutenant Chen specifically warned against approaching the colony, Vreltak reminded his executive officer. "Until we understand what he did down there, I'm not risking any of our people." "With respect, Captain," Lieutenant Chen was already experiencing cellular breakdown according to Dr. Ilani's analysis. His judgment may have been compromised. Shore's scales flushed a deep orange, indicating her frustration. "Besides, the Alliance will demand answers. They sent us a weapon and now that weapon has gone silent. We need to know if the mission was a success." Before Vreltak could respond, the tactical officer interrupted. "Captain, we're detecting a ship dropping out of FTL at the edge of the system." "Shroud?" Vreltak asked, immediately alert. "No, sir. Alliance signature. It's..." The officer paused, checking his readings twice. "Sir, it's the Prometheus. An Earth vessel." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Earth vessels were rare outside their home system, and the Prometheus was legendary, the first true deep space vessel humans had built after being granted limited interstellar privileges 20 years ago. "They're hailing us, Captain." Vreltak straightened his uniform. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate and catalog everything they saw. Her uniform bore the same unfamiliar insignia that Chen had worn. "Captain Vreltak," she said without preamble. "I'm Admiral Helena Chen. I believe you've met my son." The bridge fell silent. No one had known Chen's full identity, or that his mother was one of the few humans granted high rank within the Joint Earth-Alliance defense structure. "Admiral," Vreltak acknowledged with a formal bow. "We weren't informed of your approach. This isn't an official visit, Captain." Her expression remained neutral, but Vreltak sensed a tightly controlled tension beneath her professional demeanor. "I'm here for Thomas." "Admiral, I regret to inform you that Lieutenant Chen's status is currently unknown. He infiltrated the Shroud-occupied Meridian Colony and successfully drove off their forces, but we've had no contact since his last transmission 3 days ago." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "I'm aware of my son's status, Captain. That's why I'm here." She glanced off-screen briefly, then returned her gaze to Vreltak. "Permission to dock with your vessel. There are matters we need to discuss that shouldn't be broadcast, even on secure channels." 30 minutes later, Vreltak sat across from Admiral Chen in his private conference room. In person, she seemed more human somehow, subtle micro-expressions crossing her face, a faint scent of some earth plant that his olfactory sensors identified as lavender. Yet there was a hardness to her that reminded him of her son. "Lieutenant Chen was not just a soldier," she began without preamble. He was a prototype. The first of what we call the Nexus program. The modifications Dr. Ilani detected, Vreltak said. Yes. But what your doctor couldn't detect were the cognitive augmentations. Admiral Chin placed a small device on the table between them. It projected a detailed neural map. Normal human brains operate through electrochemical signals, neurons firing in sequence. Thomas's brain was modified to utilize quantum entanglement at the cellular level. In simple terms, his neurons don't just fire in sequence, they exist in multiple states simultaneously. Vreltak studied the projection with growing unease. You're describing quantum consciousness. The closest term in your language, yes. It allows for processing speeds and cognitive leaps that would be impossible otherwise. It also allows for something else. She deactivated the projection. Direct neural interface with technology. Even alien technology. The implications hit Vreltak like a physical blow. He didn't just reprogram the Shroud bioweapon. He connected with it. Thomas volunteered knowing it was likely a one-way mission. The augmentations were experimental, unstable. But he believed the sacrifice was worth it. For the first time, emotion cracked through her professional facade. He was right. The data he sent back has given us the key to understanding the Shroud, and what drives them. Which is fear, Captain. Pure, existential fear. Admiral Chin leaned forward. The Shroud aren't conquerors. They're refugees running from something far worse than themselves. Their bioweapon wasn't designed to destroy us, it was meant to make us compatible. To prepare our worlds for transformation. Transformation into what? Into vessels. Living fortress worlds that could withstand what's coming. She took a breath. They call it the void tide. A wave of nothing that consumes everything it touches. It's already devoured their home galaxy. They've been running for thousands of years, transforming worlds to serve as barriers, sacrificial shields against the advancing darkness. Vreltak felt cold dread settling in his chest. And Lieutenant Chin learned all this through his connection with their bioweapon? Yes. But he did more than learn, Captain. He adapted. Improved. What the Shroud took centuries to develop, Thomas restructured in hours. Pride briefly flashed across her face. He didn't just repurpose their bioweapon. He evolved it into something new. Something that could not just resist the void tide but potentially push back against it. A soft alert chimed from the tactical console. Commander Shore, who had been silently observing, checked the readout. Captain, we're detecting energy fluctuations from the colony surface. The pattern matches the final pulse sequence before everything went quiet 3 days ago. Admiral Chen was on her feet instantly. It's beginning. What's beginning? Vreltak demanded. The transformation. She moved to the viewport, gazing down at the silent colony. Thomas succeeded, Captain. He found a different path than the one the Shroud chose. Instead of converting worlds into lifeless fortresses, he found a way to enhance life, to give it the tools to fight back. As if in response to her words, a new pulse of blue-white energy rippled across the colony surface, visible even from orbit. Unlike the previous glow, this one didn't fade, it spread, flowing outward like water. Captain, Shore's voice was tight with alarm, the energy signature is expanding exponentially. At current rates, it will engulf the entire planet within the hour. Is it dangerous? Vreltak asked, looking to Admiral Chin. Not in the way you think. She watched the spreading light with an expression Vreltak couldn't read. But it will change everything it touches. Fundamentally. The comm system crackled to life. Captain, this is Dr. Ilani. The data Lieutenant Chin transmitted, it's not just information about the Shroud. It's a blueprint. A formula for. I don't even have words for it. It's like he's found a way to upgrade life itself at the quantum level. Admiral Chin nodded slightly, as if this merely confirmed what she already knew. The final stage of the Nexus program was never about creating super soldiers, Captain. It was about finding a new kind of defense, one that couldn't be overcome by traditional weapons or strategies. And what defense is that? Vreltak asked, though he was beginning to understand with growing horror. Evolution, Captain. Directed, accelerated evolution. She turned from the viewport to face him fully. You asked earlier why humans were quarantined. It wasn't just our adaptability or how quickly we advanced technologically. It was what your ancestors glimpsed in our potential future. The blue-white energy continued to spread across Meridian, beautiful and terrifying in its inexorable advance. When your survey team crashed on Earth 3 centuries ago, one of them was a precognitive, a rare gift among your species, I believe. She saw visions of what humanity might become if given access to advanced technology too quickly. Admiral Chen's voice had taken on an almost hypnotic quality. She saw us evolving beyond physical form, beyond the constraints of traditional biology, becoming something that existed in multiple states and dimensions simultaneously. That's impossible, Vreltak whispered, though the evidence was unfolding before his eyes. Is it? Admiral Chen nodded toward the view screen where the colony was now completely engulfed in pulsing light. Thomas didn't just connect with the Shroud bioweapon, Captain. He became something new in the process. Something that exists beyond the limitations of his physical form. A new alert sounded, more urgent than before. Captain, Shore's voice was barely controlled panic now. We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from everywhere on the planet's surface. Simultaneously. Put it through, Vreltak ordered, already knowing who they would hear. The voice that filled the bridge was Chen's and yet not Chen's. It resonated with harmonics that no human vocal cords could produce, layered with meanings that seemed to bypass conventional language. The transformation is almost complete, the voice said. I am becoming the shield, the weapon, the answer. But I need your help for the final stage. Vreltak looked to Admiral Chen, who stood with tears streaming silently down her face, a complex mixture of grief and pride in her expression. Mother, the voice continued, gentler now. It's time. Bring it here. Bring what? Vreltak asked. Admiral Chen squared her shoulders, once again the military officer rather than the mother. The key, Captain. The catalyst. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small crystal vial containing what looked like liquid mercury. The means to wake everyone up. Vreltak stared at the vial in Admiral Chen's hand. The liquid inside seemed to move with a life of its own, shifting and twisting as if constantly seeking escape. What exactly is that? He asked, unable to hide his apprehension. The culmination of 60 years of research, Admiral Chen replied, her eyes never leaving the vial. We call it Prometheus' Seed. Named after our ship, and after an ancient Earth myth about a being who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. It seems fitting now. Before Vreltak could press for more details, the ship's AI announced an incoming transmission from Alliance Command. The Admiral's presence on his ship had not gone unnoticed. The holographic projection of High Admiral Oro materialized in the center of the room, his ancient face lined with concern that deepened to alarm when he spotted Admiral Chen. Captain Vreltak, you were instructed to maintain communications blackout during this operation. And Admiral Chen, his voice hardened, you are in direct violation of Council directives by being there. With respect, High Admiral, Vreltak began, circumstances have. The Council is aware of the circumstances, Oro interrupted. We've been monitoring the situation. The experiment has exceeded parameters and must be contained immediately. His expression grew grave. The Celestial Vanguard is hereby ordered to deploy Contingency Protocol Omega. Vreltak felt his blood run cold. Protocol Omega was a last resort, a planetary sterilization procedure. Admiral Chen stepped forward. The Council knew, didn't they? They knew what my son would become. This wasn't just about stopping the Shroud. It was a test to see if the theories about human quantum evolution were correct. High Admiral Oro's silence was confirmation enough. You used my son, she continued, her voice dangerously calm. You used Earth's desperation to fight the Shroud as an opportunity to confirm what you've feared for centuries. It was necessary, Oro finally said. The threat the Void Tide represents. Don't you dare, Admiral Chen cut him off. Don't pretend this was about protecting the galaxy. This was about control. You've always been afraid of what humanity might become if given the chance to reach our full potential. Vreltak looked between the two, pieces suddenly clicking into place. The weapon was never meant to succeed, he realized aloud. Lieutenant Chen was sent to fail, but in a controlled way that would provide data. And when he succeeded instead, Admiral Chen added, you activated your backup plan. She turned to Vreltak. Captain, Protocol Omega isn't just a sterilization procedure. It's specifically designed to disrupt quantum field harmonics, the exact type of energy signature my son is now generating. High Admiral Oro's expression hardened. Captain Vreltak, you will execute your orders immediately. The Council has made its decision. The same Council that's been lying to humanity for 3 centuries? Admiral Chen challenged. The same Council that's been secretly experimenting on other species to find weapons against the Void Tide while telling everyone the Shroud were simply aggressive expansionists? Admiral Chen, control yourself, Oro warned. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. No, I understand perfectly, she replied, clutching the vial tighter. You're afraid. Just like the shroud. You've chosen the path of sacrifice rather than transformation because you can't imagine any other way. A new voice joined the conversation, Lieutenant Chen's strange, multi-layered tones emanating from all around them. They have reason to be afraid, Mother? The blue-white glow from the planet's surface suddenly intensified, and to everyone's shock, a figure materialized in the room, a transparent, luminous version of Thomas Chin, his form occasionally dissolving into patterns of light before reconstituting.